Does the sunlight coming through the windows harm our skin? And if so, does that mean we should wear sunscreen inside? I'm Carter, an MD PhD student, and I'm going to find out. These questions have occurred to me when studying at my dining table in front of my big windows after I noticed that my contacts, which are transitions lenses that change color in UV light, darkened when they were left on the counter and exposed to the morning sun, which isn't strong, and the light is going through a glass window followed by a tinted plastic container. This goes against my instinctual understanding, which is that glass is pretty opaque to ultraviolet light. It blocks more UVB light, the type that burns you, think B for burn, and less UVA, which can cause damage and aging in other ways, think A for aging. But I would think that the protection from both UVB and UVA through glass and plastic should block enough to prevent this reaction from occurring, right? This brought to mind a well-known image of a Chicago delivery truck driver who, after 28 years of driving, developed an asymmetric aging pattern on the window side of his face. A dermatologist I shadowed printed this image out and taped it to the walls of her office to scare everyone into using sun protection, or else your whole self would look like the bad side of this man's face, it implied. But what I wanted to know is if the window in his truck was open or closed. Thankfully, this photo isn't some internet rumor. It was a case published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. And that article, well, it didn't say. But they did imply that the windows were closed by explaining that UVA light can penetrate through glass and potentially cause these symptoms. And if you're wondering, the physician recommended that this patient prevent further damage by using sun protection while driving, and that he applied topical retinoids to improve the appearance of his skin, as well as periodic checks for skin cancer going forward. So the contacts were a clue, but it's a pretty rudimentary test. They use benzotriazole and naphthypyran monomers, which are known to change color in UV, but how specific are they for just UV? Would they change color in visible light if there were enough of it? I couldn't find any good information. It's a cool technology and my eyes love it, I recommend it, but it clearly wasn't made for accurate testing of window light. So I got these UV meters. I have meters that test for UV index, which is a linear scale based on how long it will take to get a sunburn, UVB only meters, and UVA only meters. With these devices, we can see that the UV index and UV exposure are 0 at my study spot. So there's no concern that I might get a sunburn while studying. But the UVA meter read 73 microwatts per centimeter squared. But what does this mean? Is this a lot? One way to think about it is that on this particular day, I measured the UV index in the direct path of the sun to be 5.2, which is on the border of moderate and high exposure, and protection would be required outside. The UVA was coming in at 3,500 microwatts per centimeter squared, so sitting at my table in my living room, even directly facing the big windows, was getting none of the UVB and only 2% of the UVA. Put another way, if I sat there and studied for 2 hours, I would get the same amount of UVA exposure as if I spent less than 2.5 minutes outside. Not too bad. But my spot is about 6 feet away from the windows. What if I was sitting right next to the window with the sun coming directly through? How much of the UVA would I be getting then? Turns out that at 3 inches away, the glass reduces the UVB from 156 to 0 microwatts per centimeter squared. No worries there again. UVA exposure from 3,500 to about 960. So the double pane glass is blocking about 70% of the UVA radiation. So if I had my face up to the glass for 2 hours, it would be a similar amount of UV radiation as sitting in the direct sun for 30 minutes. That's enough exposure to cause some damage over time. In this scenario, it would actually make sense to wear broad spectrum sunscreen inside. Furthermore, backing up a little to 3 feet, which is a plausible distance if you have your desk right up against the wall, the UVA exposure is 925, not much better. Now I understand how a truck driver could have such significant aging, driving for hours a day with this kind of exposure. However, at 6 feet, once we're out of the direct path of the sun's rays, we're back at 74. And it continues to decline at 9 and 12 feet from the window, even though the room is full of light. So personally, I would only be worried about sunscreen if the sun was shining directly through the window just like what was happening to my transitions lenses. These results kind of surprised me. Although I wear sunscreen daily, I never wore it inside. But now, if I'm close to a window and the sun is coming directly through, I'll apply a light broad spectrum sunscreen. If you'd like to support the channel, I have linked my favorite sunscreens and other products in the description. And if you like evidence-based information about skincare, medicine, and health, subscribe to keep me making videos. I'd like to test some window tints and check UV exposure in the car soon, as well as many other ideas. So stay scientific. See ya!